after 50, say, if we just take 50 as midlife, you got a whole nother, we're living longer, and there's a whole nother life that we have to do. So this really introduces in my mind that this isn't the beginning of the end, as many fear, but really the beginning of the most powerful, the most passionate, the most purposeful time of a man's life. Puberty prepares you for adulthood, that male menopause, if we're talking about men, prepares you for super adulthood. It's this next stage of life that hopefully can be more passionate, powerful, purposeful than anything that we had when we were younger.
Welcome to the Bountiful Podcast. I'm Shan, and this is a space for curious, thoughtful conversations about what it really means to live a bountiful life. In a world that often rewards more, faster, and louder, Bountiful exists to slow things down, to explore joy, resilience, creativity, and the small choices that shape how we live every day. Each episode is a conversation with someone who's thought deeply about life, work, health, money, relationships, or purpose, and what they've learned along the way. If you're looking for ideas you can actually live with, you're in the right place. Today I'm joined by Jed Diamond, author of 17 books on men's health, who has worked with over 40,000 men and their partners over the past 50 years. We're diving into a topic that really gets airtime: male cycles. Yes, men have hormonal cycles too, and understanding them can explain everything from mood swings to relationship changes to what we've been calling the midlife crisis. We'll talk about male menopause, irritable male syndrome, and how recognizing these biological rhythms throughout a man's life can transform health, relationships, and overall well-being.
Jed, welcome to the Bountiful Podcast.
It's good to be with you. This is great.
Thank you for inviting me into your home.
My pleasure.
I feel like a therapist sitting in this chair.
Yeah, this is a therapist's office, and there's a lot of chairs, so we do a lot of work here.
Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and background?
I'd introduce it this way. They said that the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you found out why. And so the day I was born was December 21st, 1943 in New York City. And my father was an actor in New York at the time, and my mother was taking care of this newborn baby that they'd been wanting to have for a long time, but were not successful. And that was kind of the beginning for me. The day I found out why, my purpose was the day my first son was born, November 21st, 1969. And as I held this newborn baby in my arms for the first time, I made a vow to him that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me, and to do everything I could to create a world where fathers were fully engaged with their families throughout their lives. And my father, which is part of the story, came to California shortly after I was born, so I didn't spend a lot of time in New York. And he wanted to get into the television industry that was just developing at the time. But he got blacklisted. This was during the McCarthy, period, and he couldn't work. And he became depressed and eventually took an overdose of sleeping pills because he felt if he couldn't support his family, what good was he as a man? And he was committed to a mental hospital, which he didn't get better, he got worse. And I grew up really wondering what happened to my father, when it would happen to me, because I dealt with some of my own challenges with health and mental health issues and suicidal thoughts and so on. And so that's been part of my real journey of growing up, going to college, going into medicine, and then looking for ways that I could fulfill the promise to my son and other people that deal with mental, emotional, and relational issues.
It's a thread that we share. I think I told you a little bit about my dad and how he passed away. And that phrase, what good was he as a man, I think is a phrase that plagues many men around the world.
Yeah, it's something that I grew up with and drove me and made me, I think, want to have a different kind of way in which I interacted with my children. So now we have 6 grown children, 17 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. And so my work continues to both, have a family that I can love and I can support, and I can be a different kind of father, and hopefully one that is more healed and more willing to talk openly about these issues. My father, part of, I think, many men don't talk about these things. It's something we feel it's not manly, and we keep it inside until sometimes it explodes, either in external violence, which we see a lot in the world, or violence turned inward that, we see in people that take their own lives.
Well, very excited to be talking to you today. We've got a range of topics to discuss. You've written 17 books, which is a little bit insane. People listening and watching won't be able to see them all, but this little stack is a lot of Jed's books. Really excited to get into male cycles, sort of healing that, father-son relationship, get into a little bit of, what is going on in men's hormones and in their biology that sort of has an impact on their mental health and physiology and all of that good stuff. So we're here on the Bountiful Podcast. What does it mean to you to live a bountiful life?
Well, what comes to mind is one of time that is not driven by have to do things. That when you arrived, I was sitting on the porch in the garden, and this kind of bountiful life is just the joy of being in nature, the joy of being with family and friends, the joy of doing something you feel passionate about and that makes a difference in the world, and being surrounded by books. To me, just this environment that we're sitting in is to me, books are, wisdom, they're creativity, they're our sharing, our deep stories that are meaningful in ways that we connect beyond the people we see face to face every day.
And what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Well, I think I loved who I was when I was 25 because I was very driven to do something to help people. So I would have said to that guy, yeah, good on you for finding early, because a lot of people don't find what their calling is for, some never find it. But I would also say, take your time. I never, at that 25-year-old time, took time to smell the roses, took time to relax, took time to be able to accept myself as I was. There was a lot of fear driven as a 25-year-old of, oh my God, if I don't do this, I might die, or I might end up crazy like my father, or I might, a lot of driven fear that I would tell, relax, you're okay. You're okay the way you are. You don't have to be somebody different in order to be accepted, in order to be a good man.
So we're here today to talk about male cycles. I think one of the things when I was putting together sort of the next episodes of the podcast was I really wanted sort of a balanced view. So I wanted to talk about female cycles, but in order to do that, I realized that actually I also need to talk about male cycles too. And I think I know that men have cycles as well as women do. They are different. And I wanted to talk about that because I think it's much less common in this day and age to talk about, the cycles that men go through. And maybe I have an enlightened husband, but so can you tell me, what is a male cycle?
Well, let me give you a little background on how I came to this. So, I said I've been married a long time, relatively. And when my wife and I kind of got into the years of in our late 30s, 40s, and she started going through, quote, the change of life, menopause. And she said, I think you've got some of the same, issues. And I thought, oh, come on, I'm a guy. I don't go through that. But I got intrigued about that possibility that there may be some similarities. And so I started like a writer, researching and looking for information. And eventually that came to be a book called Male Menopause. And when I was doing the research, I assumed whatever men went through, it would be very different. Men go through this, and then women go through that, and men have this, and women have that. But there were a lot of similarities in what men went through and what women went through. And one of them was cycles, hormonal cycles. So we know that women's cycles are attuned to reproductive time of life. They're, tuned into moon cycling. I mean, there's all kinds of things that women forever have been tuned into. The idea that men have something was thought to be more like, oh yeah, guys have the midlife crisis, right? Where they get a younger woman or they buy a sports car, but they don't have physiological things. Well, as I found out, just starting to tune into myself, there was something there. I didn't quite understand it. And then in the research and then studies I did, over time, we found that men, in fact, had about five different cycles that we at least were starting to tune into, that were tuned into hormones, and most specifically testosterone, although men and women have lots of other hormones. But there was a cycle of hormones in men where testosterone would be up or down like 3 or 4 times an hour.
Wow.
And so that was one. And many men too, when men and women talk, oh God, he seems like he's interested in sex all the time. He's thinking about it all the time. Well, there's a cycle that is that often, 4 or 5 times an hour. Then we found that there were daily cycles where testosterone was higher in the morning and lower at night. So that's a cycle. And then there turned out that there were cycles through the seasons that the testosterone was higher in October, this is worldwide, and lower in April. So we're still just learning why would that be? And then there was the cycles that we talk about with midlife, where men testosterone starts to drop and we start having, cycles with, the change of life. So there are a number of cycles that we were just, when I wrote the book, just beginning to look at, explore, and we're just, even now, just touching the surface because we still don't think of men as having hormonal cycles or even tuned into hormones. And it's something that I think is a lack in our healthcare system. And more men are starting to feel there's something going on here. There are things that we see monthly. We feel certain times of the month. But men also have a monthly cycle, but it isn't tied to, obviously, reproductive things going on. But when I talk to men, they will talk about, there's certain times a month I'm either down or I'm feel more sexy or I'm feeling horny at certain times. So there are these multiple cycles that we're beginning to understand.
And is it mainly driven by the rise and fall of testosterone, or are there other things going on?
There seem to be, they're more subtle and they're not as cyclic. We also, hormones go up for a lot of other reasons that are not cyclic. Like when we're under stress, the testosterone will go up or down. But the male monthly cycle seems to be unique to each man. So I have guys kind of track their own cycles to see, what do you notice at certain times of the month? As well as, what do you notice at certain times of the day? And so some of them we know, certain times of the day seem to be not more universal, higher in the morning of testosterone, lower in the evening.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about you know, if you get people to track their cycles, or if anyone listening to this is kind of like, oh, that's interesting, I never thought about that before. Yeah, what are some of the things they should be looking out for, even if they're quite subtle?
So we're looking sometimes at sexuality, we're looking at mood. You know, there's certain times of the month where you might feel more irritable. We talked about irritable male syndrome, but just generally feelings, times that you might feel more calm. So emotions we'd be looking for. And then depending on what time of life you're at, you know, if you're looking at males as you get older, 40 and older, you're looking at, you know, times where our libido drops. There's a whole series of questions that I ask people. I have a male menopause questionnaire where people can look at different symptoms that would be attached to aging and lowering of testosterone as the hormones tend to drop as we get older.
Yeah, so let's get into sort of the male menopause or menopause. Can you break it down? Like, what is male menopause? I know there's like different stages or different things that you're looking at.
The context is that when I started doing the research, my original research and the book came out in 1997, so it's been that long that this research, and mine was one of the first, you know, really research studies and books in the world. But what I said then, which still holds, is that really this idea that the midlife crisis was simply a psychological, relational, you know, kind of guys, you know, acting out, was very small part of the story. And the larger part was that there were chemical, hormonal, physiological changes that occur in all men, found generally between the ages of 40 and 55, although it can start as early as 35 or as late as 65. So there's a much broader range in terms of when men might go through. And it really, in my mind, signals the end of the first part of life and the beginning of the second. So a lot of people felt, and men, that, you know, you reach a point where it's all downhill. You know, you reach midlife and then it's all downhill after that. And what I found is, rather than this idea that there's this one mountain to climb and when you get to the top, it's down, that there's really a second mountain, you know, another mountain of life, and you have to come down the first mountain of midlife. And now there's a whole nother life. And so after 50, say, you know, if we just take 50 as midlife, you got a whole nother, we're living longer, and there's a whole nother life that we have to do. So this really introduces, in my mind, that this isn't the beginning of the end, as many fear, but really the beginning of the most powerful, the most passionate, the most purposeful time of a man's life.
I've got a question here, but it's very scientific. What actually happens during andropause, and why is it so misunderstood?
Think of it this way, that we all recognize what puberty is. Most people have been through puberty, at least those that are older than, 14 or 13 or whatever. You go through puberty, and we know that it's the coming on of many changes, right? There's sexual changes, there's relational changes, there's body changes, there's changes in the way you think. If you think about the change of life that we call andropause or menopause, male menopause, that it's really the reverse. So it's what happens now on the second mountain when you're coming down from where your hormones were coming online at one time. Now they're decreasing. They're not going totally offline, they're just decreasing. And now there's new changes that, in the way that I say that puberty prepares you for adulthood, that male menopause, if we're talking about men, prepares you for super adulthood. It's this next stage of life that hopefully can be more passionate, powerful, purposeful than anything that we had when we were younger. So if we take testosterone as an example. So when testosterone gets low, men become more irritable. And that seems to be counterintuitive in the field because we know that when weightlifters or people that are into heavy-duty bodybuilding or football players would want to bulk up and get real, rageful and, go out and kick ass and, in a sports sense, they take anabolic steroids, which are the precursor or are related to testosterone, to bulk up. And so we think of high hormones as being ones that would make men more irritable or angry. Well, it turns out for most people, it's low testosterone that makes men more irritable. So that's one of the specific things that goes on when people are in male menopause. Second thing that goes on is a loss of libido, loss of sexual desire, particularly with the person you may be in relationship with. Third is erectile dysfunction. So that's another obviously common thing we've heard about, and there's been a lot of talk about erectile dysfunction and loss of libido. But there's also a loss of energy that people, when testosterone is low, they feel fatigued more. They feel low energy. It's related to depression often when your hormones are low. Men become more depressed and sad, and related to the sadness is more irritable. So there's a whole number of specific things that people, but those are probably the most common, fairly universal symptoms that we see classically in men going through male menopause. It's important to look at the whole person and the whole part of the male psyche and body, mind, and spirit, which is what we do in my work.
Are there other hormones that sort of come into this as well that have an impact in this menopause phase for men?
Well, one of the obvious ones that, again, when I have people get hormone levels checked, and you can find out what your level of testosterone is, and I talk about that we should do it young because at its peak, you want to know what that is. So if it's dropped, as it does when we age, you want to know what it was when you were in your peak so you can know what effects or what symptoms you may have later. But we also want to measure other hormones. Specifically, we would want to know in men what your levels of estrogens are. Just like with women, and they often didn't do that when women would go to get their hormones levels checked. They often didn't have their testosterone levels checked. Yet we know in women and in men, testosterone is what provides a lot of the sexual desire and sexual, oomph that you need in a relationship. But if you didn't know to ask, you wouldn't know. A woman might have low levels of testosterone and as well as low levels of estrogen. So we would check in men as well to see if men have too high levels of estrogen, it can affect their testosterone levels. They interact.
When we talked on the phone, you talked that like with male menopause, that how the testosterone drops in as you age really has an impact on the severity of your experience of it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there are different levels of testosterone that are natural to each person. So if you look at a test of total testosterone, it may go at a high level, might be 1,200, and a low might be 400 or 300. And individuals might be naturally higher or lower, but it's still normal for an individual. So let's say you can test this with young men, you might have a young man that's 1,200. He's just, really, and there's characteristics of high testosterone men. 1,200 when he was in his 20s, he's young. And you might have another man that has normal levels, but his level when he was young might be 800. Both normal, but one higher than the other. So now let's say you measure, you're starting to have symptoms, you've gone and you have some of these symptoms and you want to know, geez, was my testosterone maybe the cause of these symptoms? So you go get it checked, and let's say your testosterone is 300. Well, if it used to be 1,200 and now it's 300, you would probably have more serious symptoms because it's a huge drop. If your normal level when you were young was 800 or 600 and now it is less of a drop, you'd have fewer symptoms. So it's important to know not only what your present level is and what normal is for a man at that age, you also want to know what your level was when you were young, and just see how big a change there was.
The work that you do with men, and if they are going through this phase, is it just, oh, my hormones have dropped, so now I've got to feel crap for a while, or depressed, or have low libido? What is some of the work that you're doing with them in order to make them feel better, be able to sort of survive this phase of life?
Men, until recently, didn't think to even look. So part of it is being able to find out, are you going through it? Men are starting to take testosterone replacement when their testosterone drops. And there's many other things that we can do beyond replacing. So with men who put on weight around the belly, particularly, men tend to put more weight around the belly, women tend to put more weight around the hips and thighs. But if you put on belly fat, not only is it unhealthy for you as a male, but the fat in your belly converts the testosterone to estrogens. That's not good. So many men who, have put on weight because of their eating habits, not only are being unhealthy, but they're lowering their testosterone levels. And so the reverse is true. If you slim down, if you eat healthy, your testosterone levels can go back up naturally without having to take external testosterone or other things.
Is joining a men's group one of the next ones?
Well, you can eat more healthy. We can exercise, because we know as you exercise, you can increase your testosterone as you do running and other exercises. We know that having friendships and deep relationships with men, I told you I've been in a men's group that's been meeting for 46 years. One of the things that increases depression and loneliness is men not having deep friendships. So good men's groups that are supportive, and they're good ones and there's negative ones. There are ones that are blame women for all our problems. That's not good. We need to be ones that support men in being more emotionally expressive, more connecting. So men's groups are another thing that men can do to improve their health, well-being, including their hormonal health.
Are there any practices you've seen that help men reconnect with their rhythms or build sort of mind-body literacy?
Yeah, I think anything like that, journaling, writing, the idea, and I think this is the concept, anything that puts you in touch with yourself, your body, mind, and spirit, if we kind of, all of those levels, is going to be helpful. So journaling, meditating, body activities, getting a massage, being in touch with, I do body-centered health practices, and get, things that can help me tune into my physical well-being. So anything like those, that the core is getting in touch with yourself, accepting yourself, getting support for your own well-being. All of these things help men in particular, who tend to be more disconnected than women as a group, that we can lower the suicide rates, because we know for men, suicide rates are anywhere between 3 and 18 times higher than for women, depending on age. And as men get older, the suicide rate skyrockets. For women, it stays relatively the same. So aging men, that's why I focus on male menopause and this. Remember, I said at the beginning, any time between 40 and 55, can start as early as 35 or as late as 65. But if we can help men at this age, we can also prevent a lot of the needless suicides that we see in my family and, you've talked about.
Should we shift gears and talk a little bit more about irritable male syndrome? So can you tell me what it is and how is it different from depression and anger issues?
Yeah, well, so the way this kind of research came to be was that a lot of the men I was seeing in this male menopause age range were having symptoms, as I mentioned, of irritability, anger, depression were part of that process. But other men were saying, I have some of those same symptoms, but I'm much younger. I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s. I'm not, dealing, I thought, with these kind of things. And so what's that about? And what I started looking for then and researching was, why would we see some of these symptoms in younger men? So here's what we found, is that not only are having low testosterone associated with aging, which we know it does, but it's also associated with stress. So if you have a young man that's stressed, you're going to find he's going to become more irritable. He's going to become more angry. We find there's changes in brain chemistry that can happen at any age that often have to do with diet and exercise. So for instance, many men have this idea that they need to be on a low carbohydrate diet and often would eat a lot of meat to, we need more protein. Well, there's some things we learned that are not good about eating low carbohydrate, particularly good carbohydrates. People would stop eating beans and rice and, think, well, they're carbs, can't do that. Well, it turns out if you lower good carbohydrates, you also lower the serotonin levels, the neurochemical in your brain that's part of what keeps your mood up. So men who were taking a diet that was very low in carbohydrates and high in protein, meats, were not consciously but unknowingly changing their brain chemistry and lowering their serotonin levels and becoming more irritable. So we want to obviously not have that happen.
Diet.
So irritability was I called the Irritable Male Syndrome, which had 4 main causes. We mentioned the hormonal changes in brain chemistry, higher stress levels, and changes in male identity of just not feeling, that my role as a man, I don't know really what am I supposed to be now that women are doing all of these things. What's the male role? So those are the 4. And then there's a 5th that I talk about that after I wrote the book, which was I call it the existential terror that I think we all have, that we sense that we're living in a world where humans are out of balance with nature, and that there is this feeling that regardless of what I'm doing personally, the human species is not doing well. And I think men particularly feel that not only personal feeling of why am I here, but the feeling of, hey, no matter what I do, we're screwed. It's bad news for humanity.
The feeling of doom.
A feeling of doom. And so that feeling either makes you want to just escape, eat, drink, and be merry, and just, watch TV and drink and get stoned, or get very angry at somebody who's to blame. Somebody must be causing this. So these are things that I found out that are part of what we call the irritable male syndrome, that is its own separate issue, separate from male menopause and separate from depression, that is also very common.
Is irritable male syndrome treatable? And what does that process look like in real life?
Yeah, so it's very treatable. It starts with recognizing that you have it. There are a whole host of things that we do, everything from learning to meditate, learning to recognize stress levels, depending on what's causing the stress, like not getting a good night's sleep, teaching people good sleep hygiene, depression, which often runs in families and often is generational, as it was in my family, that you begin to see how you can look at the underlying causes of depression, which often have to do with trauma that we've had in earlier life. You mentioned some of the traumatic things that, that our fathers have been through, or family members that then compound and build on themselves. So there's a whole lot of things we can do. All comes to first recognizing there is something that's real, and there's something we can actually measure, and there's something then that we can diagnose, and then we can treat.
One of the questions I have is, as you were talking about, low carb diet, lots of protein, lots of meat, lack of serotonin in the brain, then you've got like a decrease of testosterone because you might have stored belly fat because of a lot of the stuff that you're eating, and then so it's a confluence and a compound, which doesn't sound very good. How can men take action on this without going to like quick fixes or, that sort of thing?
Sometimes the simple answer is it gets worse if you do that. So the first thing that I help people do is there's some simple things you can do to find out if what you have.
Yeah.
So that's a good step. It's simple, it's easy. We give people a quiz, we tell them, here's the answer. Now let's see what would be appropriate for you. Yeah. Given your background, your needs. And then there's some simple things that you can do that very quickly can help you feel better.
Like eat some potatoes or something?
Well, for some people, yeah. It can be as simple, eating some things that are good and eliminating some things that are your maybe comfort foods that are really harmful. But then the importance for me is connecting to a support system. That's whether you're seeing a therapist, whether you're, having a book that guides you or a podcast that you trust people. There's so much information out in the world that I think we all hunger for somebody who we can work with, a collaborator, finding a doctor, a therapist, a clinician, a healer that knows what they're talking about, that has science behind what they're, suggesting, and that you can then work with, who's going to say, I want to help you be the best you can be. That's what we do and what Midlife does, and has been for all the years I've been doing this. And there's more and more good programs that have that philosophy.
Can we talk a little bit about, relationships and emotional cycles in relation to irritable male syndrome, I think? How does it affect romantic partnerships or family dynamics?
Well, the short answer is big time. That our relationships are where all of the feelings that we have come out. And by relationships, I mean our relationship with ourselves, even when we're alone. I mean, we do a lot of head talk. And so there's, if we've got these issues, we're going in our head and beating up ourselves. And if we're in relationship, if we have a spouse, a lover, a friend, kids, whatever relational world we live in, which we all live in some relational world, these things that are unknown or not understood become then the grit in the gears of our happiness and our joy. And there can be small irritations where it just feels like we're always nattering with each other, or we're always just on the edge of not feeling comfortable, to, relationships that fall apart because, we're fighting all the time, or my husband's depressed and he doesn't want to make love, he doesn't want to do anything, or he's getting so irritable, he's, pounding the wall. I mean, I actually did that at a time in my life where, the rage just overcame me and I didn't know what it was. And and you tend to get triggered by whoever you're in relationship with. It could be with a child if you've got a kid, or your spouse or your lover or your friend. So all of these things impact us, and treating them in the proper way and preventing problems in the proper way. It's what's helped my wife, Carla, and I be together for, 45 years because I've worked through a lot of these things, and she's had, some of her own issues, as we all do in relationship. So they're both the cause of relationship pain and suffering, and healing them allows people to have the relationships that all of us want, that are loving and intimate and last for a long time.
So does it kind of boil down to, at a practical level, having an awareness, self-awareness for each of your, whoever the relationships are, maybe not a child because they're probably still figuring that out, but if you're in a marriage, a partnership, those sorts of things, self-awareness, and then if you maybe do have some of these symptoms of either like menopause, or irritable male syndrome, figuring out what's going on, and then, finding a treatment plan. And then at a relational level, is it about having empathy for the other person, and maybe also communication, that understanding that it's like not them, that there's just some things to work through, that's like the relationship may not be the problem, it could be. It's actually, just being a human, and your body might be working through stuff.
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. I think it's, first of all, having empathy for ourselves and feeling, and that's not easy because we tend to be hard on ourselves. And most, if not all of us, grew up in families that had some degree of criticalness about them, or were absent, with fathers that weren't there, or mothers that weren't there, or, families that were stressed and so on. So we inherit a good deal of self-talk and self-blame that we have to work through. But being able to then to have ways in which men, particularly, speaking about men, can be with other men in positive environments, because men have tended to be competitive with each other throughout our lives. He's going to take my girl, or he's going to take my job, or and being in a men's group where we can learn to let our hair down and be with other guys that can listen and can support. Because women have tended to do this better than most men. Most women have more friendships, have more intimate contact with other women. They talk more openly. Well, men have the capacity for this. We're just as good at it, but often we haven't been allowed. The society hasn't told us, hey, it's okay to be with other guys. It's okay to be emotional. And we need each other. So I think all of the things you said about compassion for yourself, caring for each other if you're in a partnership, but also for men, finding a men's group. And one of the books that I wrote, the 12 Rules for Good Men, the first rule was find a men's group. And that can be, it don't have to be any big thing. It can just be a couple of guys that talk real with each other, or an environment where it's okay to be vulnerable, which many guys need to learn how to do. And once we learn it, we're as good at it as women are.
What are some signs that a man is withdrawing because he's at a low point, either mentally or hormonally, not because he's actually lost interest?
there's no way to know, until you know that there are many reasons men withdraw. And if you understand something in what we've talked about today, male menopause, a certain time of life that might be difficult, and that might, if you don't understand it, you tend to withdraw. Being able to know that there are multiple reasons, because we all tend to take it personally. If, my partner withdraws from me, I feel like there's something the matter with her or there's something the matter with me. So we blame ourselves or we blame the other person. If we don't know that there are other causes, that we go, oh, wait a minute, it isn't me that's the problem or her that's the problem, but it's this context. It's the world that surrounds us, that the stress that's going on in the world, the trauma from earlier relationships, the inability to be able to talk about issues that we didn't even know existed, whether it's male menopause or irritable male syndrome or male type depression or
cycles.
cycles. Yeah, all these things that I've been working on for many years and bringing out and bringing into the light that before then were just hidden. They just weren't known.
It's sort of related. Do you have any language or tips for communication on men who might be feeling this way or going through these sorts of things in particular, that might not have the language for it?
Many of us don't have the language for what we want to say. And many men particularly feel that there must be something the matter with them. I must be stupid, or, women will say, what's the matter? Tell me, talk to me. Well, often men, like women, don't do very well when somebody points a finger at us and demands that we talk. Makes us feel bad that we're not doing it right. So that's part of the benefit of being in a men's group where other guys can go, hey man, guys can talk guy language and can talk positively. The first step in that is being able to be compassionate to yourself and the others, and to be able to begin to say, it's okay not to have the language. It's okay to say, I'm feeling, but I can't put it into words. Or for your partner to say, I feel like you have some emotion, but you don't quite know how to say it. Am I right? So even just acknowledging that there's something going on, but you can't put it into words. And most men, until you get some training, women they learn words earlier. Their brains develop earlier than males. There's reasons why women as a group, not all women, but as a group, find language more comfortable and easy. Yep. And men as a group find putting feelings into words more difficult. We know how to get angry and put anger into words often, but I'm afraid, I'm scared, I'm worried, all of the more tender emotions. And yet, once we learn to do it, it makes relationships so much sweeter, and it makes our own sense of competency more fulfilling as we feel I can be all of me. I don't have to be strong, silent, movie type, male hero that goes into battle and doesn't talk about it.
Something that has helped me and that my husband does really well is he'll be like, I know that you're experiencing something. And I will be like, he doesn't push me or anything, but he can tell. And I'll be like, I don't know how to put it into words. So I'm the one that's usually like, I don't know how to describe what I'm feeling. And what he'll say, just try. And that's just nice. that invitation of just try, you don't have to have the right words. And then I'll, give my long-winded answer of like all of the things. And then somewhere in there will be the words. So just try has been really helpful for me. So looking at sort of zooming out to look at deeper emotional programming and self-perception, a lot of what you've talked about with, irritable male syndrome and menopause is a lack of purpose and how important purpose is for men. So can you talk a little bit about that side of it?
Yeah, well, where I would tie it into this whole discussion is that many people are looking for what's my purpose? Why am I here? And one of the things I've discovered is that for most people, one of the hidden entrees into purpose is through our wounds. I think are good examples of that, right? That often it's the wounded part of us that we've spent sometimes years, sometimes many years, trying to get away from because it was so painful and we're wounded by it and we don't want to feel it. And as we both accept that wounded part of us, and I think we all are wounded in some ways, that it not only allows us to come back to ourselves, the parts of us that have been disowned or disconnected, but it also, if we follow that thread, often is an entree into what am I here to do? My wound with my, back to my beginning with my midlife father, who took an overdose of sleeping pills because he was depressed. And I, as a 5-year-old, when this happened to me, felt somehow it was I needed to fix him. I needed to, what could I do to fix my father? Well, I couldn't at that time as a 5-year-old, but as I grew up and I followed that thread, I found in some ways that was kind of my main purpose in life, had to do. It may not be exactly what the wound is, but it was to help men and the women who love them. Mm. And that was kind of my purpose. And when I held my newborn son, not only was I wanting to be a different kind of father, but I also was thinking of my father, of what could I have done or what could I do to help men like my father and help my newborn son who now has children of his own. So I think if people can even hear that possibility, that your purpose may be through the wound or into the darkness you find while you're here.
Earlier, at the very start of our chat, you said something about being the man, or like men's need to be manly, or maybe it's not a need, it's like they've been taught that they have to be manly. How do sort of cultural ideals around masculinity, do you think, make it harder for men to figure out all of this?
Here's what comes to my mind. So the whole question of masculinity and femininity, which you can't separate, runs into a lot of cultural problems, and it's confusing, and it's often been used to put women in a certain box or a certain, feminine women are supposed to be like this, and if you're not like that, there's something wrong with you. And same thing with men. If you're not masculine enough, and there's usually some external judgment about what it means to be masculine.
What can we say to men in particular, or people, to embrace it as a turning point instead of a crisis? And then could you share some of the strengths or insights that can emerge in this stage of life?
Well, I think I'd introduce that by saying that late in life, as we think about later life, is really quite new in the evolutionary history of humanity. I mean, my father, just to give you an example, was born in 1906. The expected lifespan was something like 45 years. That was how long. So the idea that now we can expect to live to 100 years or more. For the question that you're asking is that in order to be able to enjoy this longevity revolution that's happened, we have to learn that it's new And so this whole discussion we're having, everything we've talked about today, male menopause, irritable male syndrome, depression at midlife and older, all of those things is new territory. We think of it as, well, you know, we know about all this stuff, but it's really new. So in the big picture of aging and, you know, how do we enjoy this second mountain of life, is to recognize that two things, that one, we've got this very unique, maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to have a second life, a second mountain. It used to be at top of the mountain, when you came down at 45, you were done. Well, now it's you come down and you're not done, you're just getting started. We all have the potential to live a lot longer than, we're not going to live forever, but we can live more joyfully. We can live more, in terms of purpose, to do a lot of good things in the world. We can learn to see a better world for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. But it starts with recognizing that this is new. So that gets back to what we talked about, being compassionate to ourselves. You know, geez, this is new for me, whether it's dealing with relationship issues or how to deal with depression, and the people that unfortunately die too young are the ones that didn't get the support, because you needed the support of communities, friends, family, because the tragedy for our times is that people feel so isolated.
Before we jump to the quickfire questions, what's a shift that we could make in how we raise boys that can help them better understand and respect their emotional rhythms and their cycles?
Well, there's a couple of things that we can do. One is to really accept that boys throughout their lives, so starting as soon as they come into the world, have a whole range of feelings that are as varied as any little girl. And we vary even in when you held them up for the first time, it's a boy or it's a girl. We all already start assigning boys are like this and girls are like that. You know, boys wear this, girls wear that. And I was told, I shouldn't wear those red shoes that I liked when I went to get my first pair of boy shoes, because I was told that, no, red was a girl's color, blue was a boy's color. Right. Well, no. So being able to accept our full range of humanity, our full range of feelings, starting with that boy is. Second thing I'd say is, from the beginning, boys need to be touched. And again, often you start not touching boys. They've found in studies that girl babies get touched more, just held more, just, being able to be nurtured more. So touching. And the third thing as we get older is that one of the things I didn't learn until I was an adult and had my own children is that babies teach you how to do a lot of things about being human. Many men, they don't relate emotionally to their children because they were taught, well, men don't do that. I'll wait till the children get older before I nurture them, hold them, change their diapers, all the things that men can do as well as women. So those are some of the things that I think we can do with help boys and young men as they're growing.
I really like it. Just like embrace their fullness. Don't assign some of their fullness away just because of their gender, really.
Right.
Okay, quick fire questions. What, in your opinion, is the most underrated fruit or vegetable?
Underrated fruit or vegetable? Well, the fruit I was underrated when I grew up, but I love now are blueberries, fresh blueberries. I just love.
Word that describes your life?
Adventuresome.
What are you most proud of?
I'd say I'm most proud of being a really good husband and a really good father, grandfather, and great-grandfather.
Do you have any tenets or principles that you live by?
Yeah, I would say be kind, be caring, and take risks.
Like that last one. What's something that's really mattered in your life that you didn't realize mattered as much at the time?
Well, I think the impact of my father's absence.
And then what's something that you thought mattered but realized it didn't?
I always wanted to be a millionaire when I was growing up. Now it would be a billionaire, and I found that all of that thinking of money, I need money in order to, was really very useless. All the things that I've enjoyed had nothing to do with having a lot of money.
What's something in your toolkit for when you're going through a tough season or having a bad day?
Friends, having friends that I can reach out to.
And last question, you've written 17 books, done a lot of work, spent your life working on this mission. If listeners take only one thing away from our conversation, what do you hope it is?
I think it's being willing to be very interested in the mystery of life.
I love that. Thank you, Jed, for sharing your insights and for sharing some time and space with me today. It's been wonderful to be here in your town where you live and to share some space and time with you. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for coming all this way, and thanks for gracing this community and this room.